아저씨, 내가요 아무리 짐승만도 못한 놈이어도요, 예? 살 권리는 있는 거 아닌가요? 예?
What do you see? People, individuals, strangers, humanity? Most likely, if you are like me, you'll find that you relate to these nameless faces, as we are, after all human. Then again, humanity has a long history of making sure we aren't all seen as human. Who is placed within humanity and who is not? Well, that's one of humanity's ongoing favorite sorting games. To find new exclusions, once old exclusions become a part of the included. With this thought, I pose a question. Who is human? And does it even matter? To begin, let's start with this. If there is an individual who one day finds themselves genetically different than the parameters in which humanity defines itself, is that individual still human? If they are no longer placed within humanity, does that mean they lose their human rights? If they no longer have human rights, then they have no rights that can be violated, so any violence done to them is not a crime. It is, legally, no different than pest control. Yet depending on how the story is told, depending on what reality is portrayed, our perception, as viewers, will differ. Do we sympathize with the other, or do we simply fail to even recognize their existence? Whether we recognize an individual as a subject rather than an object, as a human rather than something else, or even as an individual at all, depends on whether they are apprehended as such, whether they fit our own conceptions of what constitutes an individual, a subject, or a human. All of this is due to our own epistemological frames. The frames through which we apprehend, or indeed fail to apprehend, the lives of others as lost or injured, losable or injurable, are politically saturated. They are themselves operations of power. They do not unilaterally decide the conditions of appearance, but their aim is nevertheless to delimit the sphere of appearance itself. Visual representation, for example, plays a heavy role in if we apprehend something or someone, or fail to do so. If they fit our conception of what a human looks like, then it will be easier for us to recognize them as a subject, even if that subject is 20,000 years removed from ourselves, is the product of a millennia-long eugenics program, and has inhuman physical and mental abilities. However, if they do not fit our conception of what a human looks like, then it becomes much harder to recognize them as such. Rather, it takes effort to do so, even if they are simply the victim of an unfortunate science experiment. Now you may think, hey, hold on here. It is obviously easier to sympathize with Timothée Chalamet than a Cronenberg monstrosity. But that's the problem. And what is excluded is not usually a Cronenberg monstrosity. What has been excluded in the real world have been people who fail to be recognized for much more subtle visual signifiers. Who is seen as human, who looks human, is a subjective reality based on ideology. Who fits within humanity is completely reliant on who decides who is human. Humanity's mastery, like God's omnipotence, includes the ability to redefine who or what counts as human, and even to destroy itself. From Aristotle's slaves to the cyborgs of Blade Runner, the boundaries of humanity have been shifting. These shifts can be traced in the history of the legal institution. What history has taught us is that there is nothing sacred about any definition of humanity, and nothing eternal about its scope. But it is more than humanity redefining itself. Rather, it is that humanity is both constantly being redefined and simultaneously holding different definitions. In other words, one person's idea of who is human may differ from another person's idea, and furthermore, both persons' ideas of who is human may change with the passage of time. In a famous attempt to define man, Plato stated, "Man is a featherless biped," to which Diogenes of Sinope stormed into Plato's academy, threw a plucked chicken on the floor, and declared, "Behold, I've brought you a man." In response, Plato's academy promptly added, "with broad, flat nails" to their definition. Needless to say, defining who constitutes as a human is a subjective view based on a person's own epistemological frame. So then, who is right? Who is correct in their assessment of who is human? Well, does it even matter? Why is there such importance placed on gaining membership into humanity? Does not being human mean one does not have a right to live or have rights? Take, for example, the notion of synthetic life. If an android is deemed not human, does that exclude them a right to life? What about extraterrestrial life? Or even non-human terrestrial life? What gives humanity such importance? The answer is that we are human, and our frames are built around that. Our institutions, our laws, our courts are built around the notion of the human, not of the dogs, or the little green men, or the robots. So those outside the scope of humanity are, at least on the planet Earth, left out in the cold, thrashing in the wind. And while fictional stories may show us the abuses that humans inflict on androids or mutants, the reality is that those stories are only pointing at a fatal flaw in society that may not just create horror in the future, but already has done so in the past, and will continue to do so if nothing is done to change it.